Hi, I'm Rick Maurer, and welcome to number 3 in the series of Change Without Migraines. In this series, I'm talking about how do you blend support into your plans. So it's one thing to have a really good technical and financial plan for whatever project you're working on. It's quite another to actually get people excited, engaged, and keep that forward momentum going. So in each of these videos, I'm going to be telling you a very short story that illustrates how somebody did just that. The story I'm about to talk about today, I think, is especially important given the growing viral pandemic and the fact that there are fewer and fewer face-to-face meetings, which means a lot of the cues that let us know if we're on track, if people are interested, if they're checking email, if they're doing something else, are missing. So I want to tell you about a guy named Neil Rackham, who was an expert in selling. And he was called into a new client, and they said, look, we've got some great salespeople, man. They close sales all over the place. And then we got some other salespeople who are not so good. And we'd like to learn what are those best salespeople doing to close sales. Now, to close sales means that you're doing something to get the potential buyer to say yes. So you're not sure if they're ready to say yes. So you start saying, well, what would it take to get you in a car like that today? Hey, would you like to pay on the installment plan or would you like to pay it all up front? Hey, would you like delivery on Tuesday or how about a week from Wednesday? The potential buyer hasn't said he or she's interested in any of those things yet. It's simply a way of pushing it. So Rackham went out and he's following their best salespeople around, and he comes back and the executives say, hey, we're excited to see you. What did you learn about good sale closing techniques? And he said, they don't use them. And they said, what are you talking about? They close more sales than anybody. He said, yeah, I know they're good. And they don't use closing techniques. And they said, you're nuts. They got to. How else will they close sales? And so basically, they let him go. But he got curious by that. So rather than looking at that as a failure, he got very interested in what was going on. So he started studying better salespeople. Now, it's one thing to sell a toaster. Person comes in and goes, yeah, I'll take that one. It's a small purchase. But if they're buying an IT project or some big restructuring, something like that, there's a lot of moving pieces and there's a lot of risk involved in saying yes or saying no. Okay? And that's where the closing technique kind of thing really breaks down. I was able to interview Neil for my book, Why Don't You Want What I Want? And I want to read you a couple of questions and answers from it. Pardon me for reading. So I said, so what's the difference between successful and unsuccessful salespeople? And he said, it's at its most basic, it's a question of focus. The successful salesperson is focused on the customer and the needs of the customer. The less successful salesperson is focused on the product or service they're selling. But quite often I see in meetings in organizations where we're trying to get a new idea or a project or a change across, we're talking about what does it look like from our standpoint? And I said, so what does that look like? And he said, well, the less successful salesperson tends to be a talking brochure. I love that phrase. It's a very inefficient and expensive way of communicating a product and what it does. Successful salespeople work through questions. They ask questions that get the customer to think about their needs and their problems. They ask questions in a helpful sort of way that results in a greater understanding of the customer, of greater understanding by the customer of the key issues. Now, quite often I'll go to meetings and there'll be all of these elaborate presentations, and then there'll be a little bit of time at the end, and they'll say, what questions do you have? And the questions they're looking for is, could you explain slide 42 in a little more depth? Are you saying it's going to start here or is it going to start there? So you're hoping people are going to ask questions of clarification. Okay? This is not what he's talking about. Of course, clarification is important. He's talking about the kind of questions, the salesperson's asking the kind of questions that gets the person to go, yeah, that's going to be a problem, or that's going to be good. You're trying to find out how's that person or that group thinking, because that's what you're trying to tap into. Okay? So just that shift in one, asking questions, but asking the kind of questions so that we can learn something. One other thing he told me was that quite often they would track salespeople and they would set up these experiments, and this salesperson would come out and they go, how do you think it went? And often would go, oh, it went great. Why do you think it went great? And he said, oh, we told that potential buyer we were able to get all of our key points in, all of our key selling points. That's like a meeting and go, yeah, we got through all our slides. And he's suggesting it's something different than that. So that when the better sales people came out of the meetings and they said, yeah, it was a great meeting. Well, why would you say it? I learned a lot about the challenges they're facing. I learned a lot about where the holes are, what they really need. I hope you see the difference. It's not a subtle difference, but the way we focus our questions can be a subtle thing. We simply have to pay attention to it. At any rate, I did about a 3-page interview with Neil Rackham. Glad to send it to you. Just send me an email and ask for it, and I'll send it off to you. So thanks for watching.